My parents openly called me a mistake, made me skip prom to babysit my sister, and acted like I was their live-in maid while treating her like royalty for doodling on a wall. They never came to my graduation, never said they were proud, and cut me off the second I stopped being useful. A decade later, broke and abandoned by their golden child, they suddenly remembered I existed, because now they needed money and a place to crash. Too bad for them. The useless daughter they ignored is the one holding all the cards now. Hey, before we move on to the video, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Thanks. I got the call on a rainy Thursday afternoon. The kind of gray, miserable day that soaks into your bones even if you're inside. I was halfway through a project proposal at work when my phone buzzed. It was a number I hadn't saved, but I recognized the area code immediately. It was the one from back home. I let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again, and again. Then a text popped up. "It's Mom. Please call me. It's serious." I stared at the screen for a long time. I hadn't spoken to either of them in almost 5 years. Not since the last time I went home and left early after another dinner where I was mostly talked over, ignored, or used as a scapegoat when my sister stormed off. I had blocked their numbers after that. Every time I picked up the phone, it was just another reminder that I'd never been anything more than an obligation in their lives. A placeholder. A mistake they learned from. I didn't want to answer, but I did. The voice that met me was older than I remembered. Not just in age, there was a shakiness to it, like even the guilt was tired. "Sweetheart," she said, like that word meant something. "It's your father. He's not doing well. We've fallen on hard times. We need help. We don't have anywhere else to go." I didn't say anything for a long moment. I didn't know what to say. The part of me that spent most of my childhood trying to earn their love wanted to ask if he was okay, if they were safe, what they needed. But the rest of me, the grown woman who'd clawed her way out of emotional rubble and finally learned to breathe without their weight on my chest, was stunned by the audacity. "Why me?" I asked. My voice was flat, almost detached. "Why not Amy?" There was a beat of silence. "She's not in a position to help right now," she said carefully. "We always knew you were the strong one. We were hoping we could stay with you, just until we get back on our feet." I almost laughed. That line, "You were always the strong one," used to be a compliment I wore like armor. Now I realized it had just been a convenient excuse. Strong enough to neglect. Strong enough to ignore. Strong enough to carry the weight they didn't want to give to their golden daughter. I told her I was at work and hung up. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just ended the call and sat there, staring at the rain sliding down the window in streaks like veins on glass. I hadn't thought about my childhood in a while. I had learned to bury it neatly beneath adult responsibilities, behind a job I was good at, friends who chose me, and a cozy one-bedroom apartment filled with silence I owned. But now, as I stared at my reflection in the window, it all came back. The endless comparisons. The missed birthdays. The way I was always the bad guy, even when I was the one picking up the pieces. And most of all, the day I found out what I had been all along. A trial child. The first draft. The warm-up before the real one. They never said it outright, not at first. But everything they did made it clear. Amy was the version they wanted to get right. I was just the one they experimented on. And now, the same people who used me as a blueprint for a better daughter were asking me to take care of them. Because she wouldn't. Because I could. Maybe I should have felt triumphant. Vindicated. But I didn't. I just felt tired. When I was a kid, I used to think I was just difficult. That something in me made things harder for everyone. I was quiet, bookish, a little intense. I asked too many questions, cried too easily, and got nervous when I didn't know what to expect. I tried to be good. God, did I try? I got straight A's without ever being asked to. I cleaned up after myself. I was polite to guests and never caused scenes in public. I didn't even rebel. There was nothing to rebel for. But I always felt like a pebble in their shoe. Not enough to throw away, just enough to irritate. When I was 6, I drew a picture of our family and showed it to my mom. She looked at it and smiled thinly. "Why'd you draw yourself so big?" she asked. That's not very modest. When I was 8, I got a certificate for reading more books than anyone else in my grade. I brought it home beaming, and my dad said, "That's nice, but you should do something useful with your time. Books don't cook dinner." It wasn't always harsh. Sometimes it was just quiet. A lack of praise. An absence of warmth. They fed me, clothed me, took me to school, but I lived in the shadows of their size. And then Amy was born. I was 9 when she arrived, pink and perfect, with a full head of golden hair and lungs that could pierce concrete. She was a fussy baby, and suddenly my mom had no time for anything else. I understood that part. Babies are demanding. But something changed that never changed back. I was no longer sweetie. I became, can you do me a favor? And just let your sister nap. I was told to be quiet, to be helpful, to be mature. I was 9, and already told to grow up. When Amy turned 2, the whole world started orbiting her. I noticed it at Christmas, when she got 10 gifts and I got 3. My mom laughed it off. She's at that age where everything excites her. I told myself it didn't matter. By the time she was 5 and I was 14, it was a pattern. Her birthday parties had themes, balloons, cakes shaped like unicorns or castles. Mine were usually, we'll celebrate next weekend, that never happened. Once, I heard my mom say to a friend, we didn't really know what we were doing with me, but with Amy, we've got it down. That line stuck with me like gum on the bottom of my memory. Amy wasn't a bad kid, not then. She didn't ask to be favored. But she learned quickly that tears bought her rescue, tantrums earned her toys, and mistakes were gently explained away as learning moments. Meanwhile, I was treated like a warning label. If I forgot to do a chore, I was grounded. If Amy forgot, I was told to pick up the slack. If I got an A-, it was, what happened here? If she got A-B, it was, we're proud of you, sweetheart. At school, teachers complimented how responsible I was. Such a mature young lady. What they didn't see was that at home, I was folding laundry while Amy spilled juice on the couch and giggled. One day, I came home from middle school soaked in sweat. I'd walked 2 miles in the heat after missing the bus because I stayed behind to help a teacher carry books. My mom barely looked up from the TV. Amy's sleeping, she whispered. Try not to slam the door. That night, while I sat doing homework alone, I heard my parents in the kitchen. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, it was just a small house. And their voices carried. She's always so intense, my mom said. I feel like I have to walk on eggshells around her. She's a teenager, my dad replied. She's just sensitive. Amy's the easy one. She's our second chance, my mom said. We're not going to make the same mistakes. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, pencil in hand, trying to understand what that meant. Second chance? Mistakes? At first, I thought maybe they were just talking about parenting in general. Everyone gets better with experience, right? But over time, I realized something colder. I was the experience, the experiment, the test run. Everything they did wrong with me, they tried to get right with Amy. And instead of apologizing or growing from it, they acted like I was the price they paid for their self-improvement. I was the trial child. I started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. The way they smiled wider at Amy's jokes. How they sat through her stories with patience, but rushed me to get to the point. How my needs were attitude, but hers were personality. I stopped showing them my report cards. I stopped talking about my interests. I stopped trying. What was the point? At 16, I got a part-time job just to have something that was mine. I bought my own school supplies, my own clothes, even some of Amy's when my parents forgot she needed new shoes. They didn't thank me. They acted like I was supposed to do it. One day, my mom came into my room and asked if I could skip a school dance to babysit Amy so they could go out. When I hesitated, she sighed and said, "You're not like other girls your age. You don't need dances. You're independent." That's a good thing. But it didn't feel good. It felt lonely. I didn't cry that night. I just sat on the porch while Amy slept upstairs, listening to cars drive past in the dark and wondering if I was ever going to be someone's favorite. I remember the exact moment it clicked. It was the summer before my senior year of high school. I had just turned 17. I was working almost full-time at a small bookstore downtown, trying to save for college because I already knew my parents wouldn't help. They hadn't said it outright, but the way they talked about Amy's future made it clear they were saving for her. They never saved for me. They assumed I'd figure it out. That summer was blistering hot, and the air conditioning in our house barely worked. I spent most of my free time in my room with a fan on full blast, scrolling through scholarship applications and watching videos of college campuses I probably wouldn't get to visit. One night, I came home late from a closing shift and walked past the living room. My parents didn't hear me. They were sitting on the couch, flipping through some kind of folder, Amy's middle school report card, some art project she'd done, her class photo. She was 13, still a kid, and they looked so proud. Soft smiles. That misty-eyed look people save for memories they actually want to keep. I stood there for a second too long. She's just a joy, my mom was saying. I feel like we really got it right this time. My dad chuckled. We learned what not to do with me, at least. That wasn't the first time I'd heard something like that. But it was the first time they said it so plainly. I turned away, walked quietly to my room, and sat on the edge of my bed with my hands shaking. I felt like I had been slapped. Like the air had been pulled out of my lungs and replaced with concrete. I was what not to do. I was the failed experiment. Every late night I'd stayed up studying, every A I got, every shift I worked to pay my own way, every time I swallowed my pain and told myself they just didn't know how to show love, it all evaporated. They weren't just clueless. They weren't just imperfect. They had chosen to treat me like this. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft murmur of the TV downstairs and wondering how I could live another year in that house. Things started breaking in me after that. Not visibly. I still did my homework. I still worked shifts. I still made dinner when my mom came home too exhausted to cook and left me with Amy and the groceries. But the light was gone. Whatever tiny spark of hope I had, that one day they'd look at me and see someone they were proud of, it died in that moment like a flame snuffed out under glass. When prom season rolled around, I saved for a dress. I didn't expect much. I was going to wear something off the rack and do my own hair. But it was something I wanted. Something for me. 2 weeks before the dance, my mom sat me down. Your father and I made plans that weekend, she said. Can you watch Amy? I stared at her. It's prom night. She blinked. Is that still a thing? I thought that was more for the popular kids. I wasn't surprised she didn't remember. I had only mentioned it a dozen times. I've been looking forward to it, I said carefully. Well, your sister can't stay home alone, and we made reservations. You're always saying you don't care about that stuff anyway. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just nodded. And later that night, I returned the dress and used the money to cover a college application fee. I told myself I was done, that I didn't care anymore. But the truth was, I cared so much it hollowed me out. Senior year flew by in a blur of minimum wage jobs and mounting bitterness. I was accepted into a state university, not the one I wanted, but the one I could afford with a patchwork of scholarships and student loans. I told my parents over dinner one night, and they barely looked up. My dad said, "That's great. Make sure you look into work study. We can't help financially." My mom added, "You'll be fine. You're used to doing everything yourself." Amy, meanwhile, was being taken on college tours. She was barely 14, but they were already setting up a savings account in her name, planning her future like it was a vacation itinerary. That summer, I came home from work one day and found Amy crying at the kitchen table. She'd failed a test at her summer program. My mom was hugging her, brushing her hair back from her face, whispering, "It's okay, baby. You're still so smart. We love you no matter what." I stood in the doorway with a sick, slow fury swelling in my chest. I had failed tests before. Once in ninth grade, I brought home a D in chemistry. My mom hadn't said anything for 2 days. Then she grounded me for a week and told me I was wasting potential. Amy failed a test, and the world wrapped itself in cotton to protect her feelings. That night, I started packing. I moved out 2 weeks later. My parents didn't offer to help me carry a single box. They didn't even ask where I was going. They were too busy trying to get Amy ready for a choir trip. My mom handed me a small envelope when I was walking out the door. "We put in a little money for your dorm supplies," she said. It was $20. A week later, I got an email from her titled "Family Update." Attached were photos of Amy smiling on a boat in a white dress, throwing peace signs with her friends. There were no pictures of me in that email. There never were. I deleted it without replying. The day I left for college, I didn't cry. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't hug anyone goodbye. I just drove away in my rusted used car with a trunk full of second-hand clothes and a small bin of essentials I bought with bookstore money. It should have felt freeing, but for the first few weeks, it felt like a strange sort of grief. Like something had died in me and I wasn't sure whether to mourn or celebrate. It was hard, in the beginning. I didn't have the luxury of easing into adulthood. While other kids were partying or fumbling their way through freshman year, I was juggling 2 jobs, skipping meals to afford textbooks, and calculating exactly how many hours I had to work each week to avoid dropping out. But for the first time in my life, every dollar I earned, every decision I made, it was mine. No one could take credit for it. No one could belittle it. No one could erase it with a dismissive sigh. I majored in marketing. It wasn't my dream, but it was practical, and I was good at it. Numbers made sense. People less so. But I learned. I graduated early and landed a job in a mid-sized firm out of state. It didn't pay much, but I could afford rent, groceries, and the small luxury of silence. That silence, that peace, being able to come home to an apartment where no one sneered at my exhaustion or asked me to be invisible, that was worth more than anything. I never told my parents I graduated with honors. They didn't come to the ceremony. I didn't invite them. The last time I saw them was a year after college. Amy had just turned 18 and was starting her own college journey. My mom called to catch up. I think she was just trying to show off. She got into that arts program in New York, she said. Full ride. We're so proud of her. She's doing what she loves. It's just different, you know? Raising her was easier. She has this spark. She's so naturally gifted. I didn't reply. I just listened, phone pressed to my ear, feeling the familiar old ache. Then she said something that stopped me cold. I'm glad we didn't push her too hard like we did with you. We learned our lesson. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even said with regret. It was like I was a failed experiment she could now speak about in hindsight. A parenting misstep she had learned from. I ended the call shortly after. And that was it. That was when I decided I was done. I blocked their numbers. Changed my email. Moved to a new city when I got a better job offer. Started going to therapy. For the first time, I said it out loud. They didn't love me. Not really. Not equally. And it's not my fault. It took a long time to believe that. To unlearn the way I had been raised. I dated carefully, afraid of repeating old patterns. I made friends slowly, unsure how to trust people who weren't obligated to tolerate me. But over time, I found my people. There was Mia, who saw me crying in a coffee shop after a brutal therapy session and just sat with me in silence until I was okay. There was Jordan, my neighbor, who lent me tools and never expected anything in return. There was Caleb, funny, warm Caleb, who eventually became something more. He was the first person I ever told everything. Not just the facts, but the feelings. The bruises that didn't show. The small daily humiliations. The deep belief I'd carried for years that I was only tolerable if I was useful. And instead of recoiling or offering pity, he just listened. He held my hand and said, "That's not love. That's survival." I fell for him the moment he said that. Caleb and I eventually moved in together. We built a life full of rituals and inside jokes and mutual care. He never once made me feel like I had to prove my worth. I could just be. By the time I turned 30, I had everything I never thought I'd get. A job I was proud of. A partner who loved me. Friends who treated me like family. I was content. Scarred, but healing. Then came the phone call. The one I mentioned earlier. The one that pulled me back into a world I had clawed my way out of. "It's Mom. Please call me. It's serious." I sat with it for a long time. I showed it to Caleb. His first reaction was concern, but then he read the text again and said, "Are you sure you want to go down this road?" I didn't answer right away. Eventually, I called her, and she said what I had expected, but never thought I'd actually hear. "Your father is sick. We're broke. Amy's not helping. We need you." She said it like it was my duty. Like I was still that quiet teenager who gave up prom to watch my sister, who skipped dinner to save for college, who folded laundry while they praised Amy for scribbling on a wall. I asked why me, and she said, "Because you're the strong one." Strong. That word, again, used like a leash, used like a reason to never have to love me the way they loved her. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask if I had space in my life, in my home, in my heart. She just assumed, because they always assumed I'd be there. But I wasn't a child anymore. I wasn't the same girl standing in a kitchen doorway overhearing her mother call her a mistake. I told her I'd think about it. Then I hung up and sat in silence. Caleb came and sat beside me. He didn't say, "You have to help them." He didn't say, "They're your parents." He just said, "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." And I realized, for the first time, I had a choice. They had never given me choices before. Just expectations. Just needs I was supposed to fill. But now I had power. And I wasn't sure I was ready to give it up. I didn't respond for 2 weeks. Every time I reached for the phone, something in me recoiled. My therapist once told me that trauma doesn't just live in memory, it lives in the body. And every time I thought about hearing my mother's voice again, or seeing their faces, my chest tightened like a trap. My stomach twisted. My hands went cold. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. I finally texted my mom back. I told her I could come visit for one day, a short one. I made it clear, this isn't a reconciliation. I'm not promising anything. Her reply came instantly. Of course, sweetie. We just miss you so much. Sweetie, that word used to mean something. Now it felt like someone else's name. The drive back to my hometown was quiet. Caleb offered to come, but I needed to do this alone. I was older now, stronger. I wanted to face them as the person I had become, not the girl they trained to apologize for existing. I hadn't been to the house in over 10 years. When I pulled into the driveway, it looked smaller than I remembered. Dingio. The paint was peeling. The porch sagged. But the door was the same shade of blue, and my hand trembled as I knocked on it. My mother opened it like she'd been waiting. Her face was lined, her hair thinner. But the eyes were the same, scanning, assessing, deciding what version of herself to perform. She smiled like a hostess at a party she didn't want to be at. "Oh, honey," she said, and tried to hug me. I stiffened. She let go quickly. Inside, the house was dim. My father sat in his recliner, frail and sunken in a way that startled me. He used to fill every room with his presence, loud, dismissive, commanding. Now he looked like he'd been hollowed out. "Look who finally decided to visit," he rasped. I couldn't tell if it was a joke or an accusation. I sat on the edge of the couch. I didn't take my coat off. Amy wasn't there. "She's been busy," my mother said, reading my expression. "She's in LA now. New Art Collective. She wanted to come see your father, but, airfare." I almost laughed. I wanted to say, that never stopped you from flying her to camp in Vermont. But I bit my tongue. They served coffee. I didn't touch it. What followed was a conversation so awkward, so stilted, it barely qualified as one. They asked about my job, my life, made small comments about how I looked healthy and grown up, like I'd merely been away at camp and not cut them out of my life for a decade. Eventually, the truth came crawling out. My father had stage 3 colon cancer. Treatments were expensive. Insurance was running out. And they were drowning. "I hate asking you for help," my mother said. "But you've always been the responsible one. We know we made mistakes. We didn't always show love the right way." She didn't look sorry. She looked tired. Tired in the way people do when they've run out of easier options. I asked her a question I'd been carrying for years. If I had stayed close, if I had never left, would you have asked me for help sooner? She didn't answer. My father cleared his throat and said, "We need you now." That was the real answer. They didn't want me. They wanted what I could give. Money. Time. Labor. My absence had made them desperate. My strength, the very thing they used to punish me, had become useful. I stood up. "I'm sorry you're going through this," I said. "But I'm not the solution to the problem you created." My mother blinked. "We're still your parents." "You were never really that," I said, quietly. I walked to the door. My father didn't move. My mother followed me. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "Let's not leave things like this." "You left them like this a long time ago," I replied. Then I left. Back in my car, I sat with my head against the steering wheel, heart racing. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't cried. I hadn't broken. I had done something they never taught me. I set a boundary. And I kept it. A week later, my sister reached out. Her number wasn't saved in my phone, but I recognized it instantly. "Hey, I heard you came home. We should talk." I didn't reply. Then another message. "I'm not like them. You know that. Please." I thought about it. About how Amy had never once stood up for me. Never once called out the imbalance, even when it was so obvious a stranger would notice. She benefited from it. She relied on it. Being not like them wasn't enough. Not anymore. I didn't block her. I didn't respond either. I was done carrying silence for other people. In the months that followed, I focused on my life. Caleb proposed. I said yes. We bought a small house in a city far from where I grew up. I started mentoring girls at a local nonprofit, young women like me, trying to navigate a world that kept telling them they were too much or not enough. My parents didn't call again. Eventually, I heard through a distant cousin that my father passed. My mother didn't send an obituary. There was no funeral invite. Amy posted a filtered black and white photo of him on Instagram with the caption, "Rest easy, Dad. You were always so full of love." I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I closed the app and went back to my life. My real life. The one I built myself. Without them, it had been over a year since my father died. A strange, hollow sort of peace followed. There was no funeral for me. No family gathering. No carefully worded obituary with my name among the survivors. In their final chapter, I didn't exist. I thought that would be the end of it. And for a while, it was. I focused on the wedding, on Caleb, on the life I'd built with brick after brick of effort no one else ever helped carry. There were days I actually forgot how much pain I used to live with. Days when laughter came easily. Nights when I slept without reliving old arguments or the echo of my mother's disappointed sigh. Then came the email. It was from Amy. Subject: Mom needs help. I stared at it for 10 full minutes before I opened it. I should have deleted it. But some old part of me, some scarred, still curious fragment, needed to know. It was long. Too long. She talked about how our mom had spiraled after Dad died. How she'd been spending recklessly. How there was a second mortgage on the house. How she might lose it. How she'd been talking about moving in with Amy in LA, which Amy couldn't do because her boyfriend wasn't comfortable with that kind of pressure. Then came the kicker. She wants to come live with you. She says you have a house now, that you'd understand, that maybe you've forgiven her. I told her I wasn't sure, but that I'd try. That final line hit like a slap. Try? Amy would try to get me to clean up the mess she refused to even acknowledge a decade ago? I didn't reply. Not that day. Not for several weeks. But the messages kept coming. My mom messaged me on a burner account. Her original one, apparently, had been blocked so long she forgot the password. She left voicemails from unknown numbers. She even wrote a letter. A real, handwritten letter that arrived in my mailbox and smelled like the same damn perfume she used to wear when I was a kid. Cheap, flowery, overbearing. In it, she said she missed me. That she was sorry if she ever made me feel unloved. That she didn't know how to raise a child like me, so strong, so stubborn, so different. She said Amy had always been more sensitive, more needy, and that she thought I didn't need the same things. And then she said something that stopped me cold. I know I made mistakes, but now I need you. And family forgives. That's what real love is. No, that's what she thought love was. A rope she could pull whenever she needed something. I didn't know her anything. Not after all the nights I sat crying on my dorm mattress because no one had ever told me I was worth caring for. Not after the holidays I spent alone while she posted pictures of Amy holding presents under a tree. Not after she told me to watch Amy on prom night, because I wasn't the kind of girl who'd care anyway. But still, I felt the fire rise. So I wrote back. I wrote the kind of message you draft and delete 100 times. But this time I sent it. Subject: You want an answer? Here it is. Mom, I received your letter. And I've read every message. Every voicemail. Every excuse wrapped in nostalgia and guilt and rewritten history. You don't get to say you're sorry if you made me feel unloved. You did. You made me feel invisible. You made me feel like a burden. Like an obligation you didn't ask for. Like I was the practice round before you got the daughter you actually wanted. You called Amy special and gifted and sensitive. You called me strong so you could justify never caring for me. So you could heap responsibility on me and never look back. You ignored me when I was sick. You forgot birthdays. You made me skip prom to babysit. You said I was what not to do. And now, because life didn't go the way you planned, because Amy won't save you, because you're out of people to manipulate, you remember me. No, you don't get to come into my life now and ask for warmth from a hearth you never helped build. You don't get to call this forgiveness. This isn't a movie. There's no emotional reconciliation scene. There's just me. The daughter who made it out. The daughter you never celebrated. The daughter who did everything alone. And she's not opening the door. Not this time. Take care of yourself. But don't ever mistake my silence for permission to walk back into my life. My name, I didn't send it to Amy. I didn't post it online. I didn't even tell Caleb. I just sent it and blocked every number I could find. I thought that would be it. But 2 months later, I got an invitation in the mail. Amy was getting married. In some glossy, trendy venue in California. The kind with glass walls and flower arches and calligraphy fonts that cost more than my entire college education. And tucked in with the invite, barely concealed, was a note. It would mean so much if you came. Maybe this can be a fresh start. Love, Amy. I almost laughed. Amy, who once watched me take 2 buses to work and never offered a ride. Amy, who posted her art school acceptance with "Thanks to my amazing family," while I ate ramen and cried over FAFSA forms. A fresh start? She wanted me there because my absence would be loud. Because without me, there was no illusion of family. I RSVP'd online. Decline. Then I made a donation in her name to a nonprofit that helps emancipated youth get back on their feet. I posted the receipt on social media with one sentence. Some of us don't get the family we need, so we build our own. The message wasn't for Amy or for my mother. It was for every girl who ever sat at a dinner table, listening to the clink of silverware and wondering what she did wrong to deserve silence. It was for the girl I used to be. She would have been proud. I know I am. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button.